Here we go.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to May's OSRBC Authors Chat. We are so excited you could join us this evening as we host an author whose books let readers travel into fantastical worlds where she spins tales of romance, suspense, and sci fi, full of kick ass heroines and possessive alphas. She is here tonight to chat about her novel, The Bone King and the Starling, that has set BookTok abuzz, the amazing Elizabeth Stevens.
Ooh, I love that introduction. Thank you. I'm super happy to be here and chatting with you all.
So, for anyone that's new here this evening, we have Megan, who is Megan. You want to give a wave? She's acting as our moderator in the chat panel. We do ask that everyone keeps themselves on mute throughout the evening to aid in our recording quality. And if you have questions, so please submit them in the chat panel. We will be checking in with Megan throughout the night for her to ask your questions to Elizabeth. With that, let's get things started. We always like to kick things off with some icebreaker questions. They're just some fun things to warm up as people are still coming in before we start talking about the Bone King and the Starling. With that, I'll hand it over to Donna for the first question.
All right, Elizabeth, if you had to pick a favorite main character from any romance series to be your book boyfriend or girlfriend, who would you choose?
Oh, that one's easy, and TT will appreciate this. I see her there, but it's Kane. If I had to pick one for me, it's Kane, and it's because he is the first book boyfriend I ever wrote. So he is the lead from Lord of Population, and I always say that I wrote all of the good qualities of a book boyfriend into Kane, and then all of the ones that came after can have their like moral dilemmas and their flaws. And definitely as time goes on, they need increasing amounts of therapy. But Kane is the one that I would choose for myself.
So we ask all visiting authors this after the topic came up at one of our first guests. Do you have a chocolate drawer?
A chocolate drawer. You know what? This is a perfect question for my husband because my husband has a snack drawer that's horrifying. I'm actually not really a snacker. I'm like more of a, to be fair, I'm also 9 months pregnant. I'm more of a, I need a McFlurry immediately kind of person. And then we'll just like drop everything I'm doing and get into the car and go get a McFlurry. I never have like a consistent snack that I like. It's always random and it's always very urgent.
All right, continuing with our food theme. If you could have a meal with any author from the past, who would you pick?
Oh, oh my, that's a tough one. This is going to be a weird answer, and he's not really the most politically correct author. Oh, maybe actually I would go with Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams would actually be maybe my first choice because Douglas Adams was like my origin story into sci-fi. And he is like one of the most hilarious authors out there. I think he might be the funniest author I've ever read. But my original gut answer was to say P.G. Wodehouse, who, again, not the most politically correct author out there. He was writing in a very different time period. But I say that funny enough because Douglas Adams once wrote that the funniest author he'd ever read was P.G. Wodehouse. So I'd be curious to see what a dinner with P.G. Wodehouse would be like. Ooh, and then Octavia Butler would obviously be the other one because she's just, the queen.
If you were a shapeshifter, what would be your animal form?
I think it would be like a berserker from my Dark City Omega series. So it would definitely be like some sort of, I was trying to describe this earlier and I was like, I think it's kind of like a rhino wolf bear. Like I'd want like two mouths and to just be horrifying and vicious. That would be fun.
Okay, if you had to be trapped in a house with five other authors, a hostage writer's retreat of sorts, who would you want to be trapped with?
Oh my gosh, that's a fun one. Well, Natalie Shea wrote my favorite book of last year, which is Sucker. And so I'd want to be trapped with her. Katie Robert, who I just think is a fantastic human being and just all around glorious addition to the author community. Who else? Ali Hazelwood, I had the pleasure of meeting at Steamy LitCon last year, and her energy is like unmatched. She's always just like so enthusiastic and happy to meet all the people. Theodora Taylor, because I think she's a genius, and maybe Cleo Evans. I have so many. I'm just yeah. There's it's hard to pick.
They all are great authors. Do you remember the first romance novel that you read or the one that got you into romance?
I can't remember the first like classic romance novel I ever read, but I do know the one that I think had like the most deep, perhaps scarring imprint was there's a scene out of The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice where he licks her period blood out of her underwear. And that like stuck with me. I don't even know if they were in a romantic relationship, but I think that's kind of like if you were to summarize all of my books into like one central instigation point, it would probably come back to that point in the past. I think the first book that like converted me into like a romance, like a classic like paranormal romance reader was probably I was a Twilight origin story girl. And I was like, I didn't realize that they had like up until that point, I'd just been reading like YA fantasy or YA sci-fi with like maybe romantic elements, but not something that was romance first. So Twilight was eye-opening for me. And then of course led down like the J.R. Ward road of like spicier stuff. And the rest is history.
Okay. So it's almost summer, and while you're probably going to have your hands a bit full this summer, congrats, by the way. Do you have a book that is on your must-read list that you're super excited about and that you think everybody should be adding to their TBRs as well?
Oh my gosh, yes, I do. And it's the top of my Kindle right now. And because my brain is slightly slow, I have to look it up. But I recently connected with Anna P because Anna P, that's just what she goes by. But Stumped. This is what I'm super excited about. But it's like a Desi cricket romance, age gap cricket romance with like an all South Asian cast, and it makes me like super excited because I've never read anything like that before. Cricket
I,
romance, all South Asian cast, or anything by Anna P. So I'm super stoked.
I've never read Cricket as a
I'm
I
series.
know.
adding that right now. Cricket
I was
romance.
like, that is going on my TBR
Yes.
instantly.
It was so funny. I posted about it somewhere, and one of my readers was like, just saw cricket romance. And she was like, because I write monster romance, her brain went to like, does he turn into like a cricket man? And I was like, no, not that kind of cricket, like different, the real one.
That's awesome. That is going on my TBR this summer.
Yes.
Yeah, super stoked.
Okay, time to transition into what everyone came here to talk about, the Bone King and the Starling. We are curious, did you have a specific inspiration for this book?
I didn't have a specific inspiration. I actually had like a gap that I was desperate to fill because I have been looking for anyone that's followed me on social media will know that like every 6 months I put a call out just in desperation for a Viking romance with a black female lead. And either I get time travel or I get shifters, and I actually just really want like just a Vikings, like the show Vikings, but with a black female lead. I understand that historically that's a little bit tricky. And if it were to be historically accurate, maybe not a book that I would necessarily want to read. So I was like, let me just write this the way that I exactly want to read it, which is no historical accuracy, black female lead, Viking vibes only. And that's kind of what we got with the Bone King and the Starling. It also the writing of it came at like kind of a weird time just because I wrote it around the election last year And I don't know, it just kind of like it felt like a book I kind of needed at the time. I don't even know what it was exactly about it, but mixed black woman in like an all white society is kind of like my background. I've grown up in a lot of like all white neighborhoods. Like my family was the only family of color where we lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And I don't know. I think there was just something about that feeling of like kind of loneliness, especially after Kamala Harris like didn't win and had this crazy guy take office. But yeah, I kind of wrote it for myself, and then I wasn't sure if like anybody else would want to read it because it does tackle some themes that are like a little bit dicey, like putting a black female character in the position of thrall in that environment, in that time. But I was like, I don't know. I wrote it exactly how I wanted to read it. I wrote it as like pure catharsis, and then in the end, I was like, let me just try and see what happens publishing it. And I've been so flabbergasted and super happy with the response.
Okay, so you pretty much covered the Vikings. We were about to ask about why Vikings, but so was the tournament a concept from the beginning or something you came up with as you developed the storyline? Because that was interesting to us while we were reading.
Yeah, the tournament was, I wanted it to be something. I needed a believable way for the king to have arrived in this town. And I also wanted Vikra was like interestingly like a side character who I really liked. So I wanted some way to kind of like demonstrate Vikra's asset to the community and like why he ended up becoming like the chief of the little community. And I also just thought it would be really fun to put Tori in a situation where the king just like let people hack away at his body parts. So all came together.
Okay, so you started to talk about this, but in your world, was not a monolith term in the various societies. In Starling's society, they were very much slaves, but in other communities, they seem to be more of paid sex workers. What made you want there to be such differentiations amongst the various societies?
Well, historically, I know I didn't abide by anything historically accurate, but historically, thralls actually did serve in very different capacities depending on the village or the tribe. Sometimes they were just slaves and they were just, folks taken in raids and they were just put to work in the towns. But in other places, they were more like indentured servants. And in most places, I think, well, some places, they had the ability to earn or buy or be bestowed their freedom in some ways. And so they weren't all sex workers or related to sex. They, performed a whole host of duties in the society. And I kind of wanted that aspect of it reflected, but I think it was more about King Kalai's like his disinterest in having thralls as like a member of the caste system in Wrath. And in his like in the main, in the citadel in the main uh central town, they didn't have thralls anymore. And so his kind of take was that if thralls were treated in a way in the particular villages that he went to visit, he would probably leave them alone. But in this particular instance, like there was so much corruption and collusion going on that he was like, the system needs just a complete redoing. And I liked that about him. I found him quite reasonable in that regard.
So there is a large amount of world building to create the background for the Bone King and the Starling. Do you see yourself ever revisiting this world?
I think it's so funny that you phrase it that way. I literally was just telling someone the other day. I was like, "This was really easy for world building. It didn't require very much." So in terms of like really in relation to my other books, the world building here was very low. The book I'm working on now is just like, I'm almost like, what am I doing here? I have like 8 different kinds of sorcerer, each one with their own like particular, like where they draw their magic from, each with their own different like castle type thing. it's a mess. So for me, the Bone King and the Starling was actually like a refreshing chance to be able to use an existing like concept like Vikings and to just focus entirely primarily on the relationship. That said, I intended to write this exclusively as a standalone. I had originally put this on in a tab on my website called Viking Kings. And I was like, girl, don't do this to yourself. And I renamed the tab standalones as like a big, giant message to myself and to my readers. I definitely won't do a continuation of like Kalai and Starling's story. That's just not something I do. Like maybe a bonus chapter someday if I feel like it, but I don't write like multi books with the same characters. They might appear elsewhere, but I love having characters have like a rounded off HEA. That's it's hard for me not to say I will never write Vikings again in this universe and that you'll never cross Tinkalai and Starling's path again because yeah, I love Vikings and they're a lot of fun. And Black Vikings is something I really need to do more of. So I'd love to do like all black cast for Vikings.
That'd be really cool. Kalai being a virgin as well was quite the plot twist. What made you want to have a virgin hero for your heroine?
I love a virgin hero. It's one of my favorite micro tropes, especially when they're like extra ruthless and bloody. So, actually, if you've read any of the population series, you'll know that Lave from book 3, he's like this immortal with like this grandiose personality and very brutal and practical and ruthless. Less like I think he's like more stoic than Kalai for sure, like more statuesque, but he's also a virgin. And the minute I wrote him as a virgin, I was like, this is it. I love it. So any occasion I can to like make a otherwise like violent, brooding alpha character a virgin, I will take.
So we love the cover for the book. How involved were you in the creative process for it?
Entirely too involved. My cover designers, if they ever want to work with me again, I don't know. We'll see if I get lucky. But it's actually Jen Plummer has written a series where she did kind of this clinch style for her covers. I think one of them is called Crave Me is the exact cover. Where I saw it and I was like, yes, vibes. I love it. I love the return to clinch. I think when Katie Robert did like a deal with the dragon and she had like a monster clinch cover, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And for Viking romance, it seems so obvious that I would do some kind of a clinch. But it was funny because the designer and the illustrator and we got into it because I wanted the full body. And she was like, I'm not going to do that for you because I want you to be able to see their faces and their facial expressions. And I have to admit that the end result has been absolutely stunning. And so she was probably right. But it was a battle to get there. And Sandra Maldo, who did like the overall like package, like putting everything together, she also I was like, I don't know if it's right, if it's wrong. And she's like, girl, let me just do it the way that I know it's supposed to be done. And you're going to be happy. And I have been very happy. Overall, loved the way everything turned out. And Sandra Maldo for the hardback edition of that book, she gets all credit because she, I think, banged out like the dust jacket cover and the actual hardcover foil cover. And I don't think I had any notes like the first draft. She was incredible.
So, the Bone King and the Starling blew up on social media. As an author, what is it like to suddenly have a BookTok famous book?
It's pretty great, but it's also like kind of frustrating because you don't really know what works ever. This was like a book that just really was such a surprise for me because I have had like kind of strategies around how I market my books and rely a lot on like promo stacking and like trying to make sure I get all of that lined up with, the arcs that I send out with all of the the little bit of money that I spend on ads, trying to make sure these all like layer to try to build some momentum. And that's been pretty successful. And it's been okay successful in the past. It's hard to, measure success unless you're, except for against yourself. But this was the weirdest release I've ever had because for this book, focused entirely on a direct strategy. So it was the first time I ever sold audiobooks and ebooks directly. And I was so nervous something was going to go wrong tech wise, but so far we had like a minor hiccup with like some audiobook files getting out of order, but on distributor channels, not on my own channel, but they got resolved really quickly. But it was so strange because all of the marketing I put out was to funnel people directly to my website. And I was like, buy from my website. I did not care about Amazon rank. I did not care about anything else. I was like, did not expect any pre-orders for the book. I don't even know if I had any pre-orders for the book on Amazon or elsewhere. And then I needed to check something for my I needed to grab an ISBN off of Amazon. And then I checked like 2 days after the book was released and saw that it had an orange banner and was like #1 in Viking Romance and was like in the top 1,000 of the store. It's like, how did this even happen? Like, I still don't even know. I don't know how it ended up there. And then posting about that, one of my favorite things about the book community is like, people love to see you succeed. And so when I posted about that, then I had like a post go super viral on Instagram and like semi-viral on TikTok. And it was just, yeah, snowball after that. And yeah, it feels great. Very frustrating because I'm like, did I not need to do any of the things that I was doing before to have a book do well? Or like, I just don't know what about it all came together. Unreplicatable, but very happy.
So, we want to pause here and check in with Megan and see if there's any questions specific to the Bone King and the Starling in the chat right now before we start talking about your writing process in general. Megan, I see out of the corner of my eye the chat window has been moving, but I haven't tried to even read it. So I'm going to give the ball to you to talk.
Jess has a couple questions. So, first of all, was the concept of going town to town to find and train fighters a thing that actually happened in Viking worlds, or did you create that? She thought it seemed really smart and she really liked how it created loyalty and how the son was loyal to the Bone King.
Yeah, that's like kind of where I definitely take a lot of creative license because I'm like, this seems like what I would do to try to consolidate power. Granted, the only people that listen to me are my husband and my toddler, and even them, not most of the time. So in practice, I don't know how it would work or if I would be the person to initiate that, but it seemed logical to me. So a lot of my world building is based in like 1 + 1 equal or 2 = 1 + X. And so I have to solve for X. And then I'm just like, okay, if I need to get him to this town, how can I do it in a way that might make sense?
And then Jess also wanted to know, how do you imagine Starling to fit into the Bone King's world? With her desire for him to show reservation and perhaps less revenge, will be will be not as successful as a Viking.
Oh, that's a good question. I like stayed up so late the other night because I had like an idea for like a bonus chapter that would actually answer that question. I'm not sure if I should just maybe give you like a tease, but some of Starling's reservation, I think, will shift when, like, for example, her direct like kinfolk are put in jeopardy. Like folks related to her or her best friend and those kinds of things, because Starling's the kind of person who, if she herself is in trouble, she's not going to self advocate. She's not good at that. And it's one of the things that I liked improving in her character as the book went on, but I think she still has a ways to go. But when she sees like other folks that she loves, like in jeopardy, then she's more willing to accept gruesome torture. And Kalai will probably still gruesomely torture people that she doesn't care about. He'll just do it maybe like more discreetly.
Makes sense. And then I hope I'm saying this right. Kashria, she'd like to know if you had a favorite quote from the book.
Oh man, I was reading the book again the other day, and so many times I hit points where I'm like, did I write that? I'm like, oh my gosh, am I kind of good at this? Like, it's always a shock to me to see what comes out in my books. I can't think of a quote off the top of my head, but there was one that I read yesterday where I was like, oh, I really like this. But I can tell you that the quote that the entire book comes down to was the scene in the Great Hall, where he is basically like, mercy, like she's like, mercy, my lord, and then his response is, mercy, how can I offer you what the gods have denied me? And I think the entire book actually just comes out of that one sentence. I knew I wanted that exact scene, and then everything else around it was just me trying to get to it.
Um, did you have fun coming up with how you were planning to torture and kill the leader's wife?
Oh, so much fun. It's my favorite. I love torturing characters. I wrote a book in like the third grade where I was really into, and then there were none, like at the time, by obvious author whose name I'm totally blanking on. Anybody know what I'm talking about? That Agatha Christie. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm like, what's going on with my brain? And so I wrote a book where a bunch of my classmates killed each other off, and everybody was really into it. They all wanted to be involved and like pick how they got to kill their other classmates off. And then my mom, I read it aloud to the class and got a standing ovation. And then my mom got called to the principal's office, and I had to have like a parent teacher conference. I'm pretty sure it was like one of those things that now would have been marked as like, this person might be like a danger to her school. But at the time, there were fewer school shootings. And so they just thought I was a weirdo. But I definitely had a lot of fun with that. And that was one of those moments where I was like, I don't know if I should really publish this, because it was super gruesome, way more horror-esque than I usually would go in a romance. But again, I just, let it all hang out in this book and just went wacky and weird with it, as wild as I could.
That's all the questions for now, but we'll be checking in a couple more times. So if you think of anything while we go on, pop it in the chat.
Okay, so let's have some questions about your writing process here. As an author, do you feel that you are story driven or character driven? Which comes to you first when you are writing?
I think I'm more plot driven actually than character driven. Sometimes the characters don't, like, their personalities don't come to me right away, and it, like, I get them wrong. I'm a total pantser when I write, and so I usually have like an idea of a scene, and then maybe like somewhere down the line that I think I might end up. I don't always end up there. And sometimes I get super frustrated because I try to drive the story towards it and I just like never make it to that other scene that I'd envisioned way down the line. But a lot of times I have to like back up, or like Yaron is kind of my best example for that. I just got him totally wrong and I had to rewrite like 20,000 words or like 30,000 words because I was like, this guy is just not coming together right. And then backed up and made him like a very good boy, the kind that like crawls on command, because that was not his original drafting and he needed it desperately. But yeah, so I'd say probably more plot driven.
So, as a group, this was a consensus question. We wanted to know, what is your favorite thing about writing aliens?
Oh, aliens are so fun because you can just do whatever you want. And I think actually one of my favorite things about writing aliens is that you can tell real world stories, without, like, you can use them as such fascinating allegories for real world issues without deeply traumatizing people. Like book 4 in my Very Mate series covers like a alien male who is in the at the end of the day like deeply racist or speciesist or whatever that's called when you hate humans. But he like can't stand humans, doesn't like anything about them, and if you were to try to do that in a real world context, there's almost no way that it would work in a way that's, I mean, people have tried to write KKK romances and Nazi romances, and I don't know why. It just doesn't make anyone feel good. So when you use like other species, you can tell, I think, an important story without having to rely on the historical context that makes it so yucky. And you can tell like deep, like talk about race in a way that's decoupled from race, or talk about power in a way that's decoupled from like real world power structures and systems. And I think that's one of my favorite things about writing aliens, is coming up with those hierarchies and like seeing who has power, and how, always in the case of my Very Mate series, how Black women dismantle it or challenge it or, you know, overcome it in some way. And it makes me super happy.
So, do you have tropes that you really enjoy writing and ones that you have discovered that you don't enjoy working with?
I mean, I love like enemies to lovers is too broad as a trope, but it is kind of an overarching vibe that I like in my books. But when we come to like micro tropes, I absolutely adore things like only one bed, but I love writing it in like a weird way, like trying to figure out like an unconventional way to include that. I love like good boys and good girls. I love he falls first. He always has to fall first. He has to be obsessed from like pretty much the minute he sees her, which is why fated mates can be really fun too. Um, and the tropes that I don't like, I do not like friends to lovers, and I don't like second chance romance. I just think that if you have been hanging out for that long and you didn't know pretty quickly that you wanted to bang each other, like maybe you shouldn't be banging. And like if you banged once and then it didn't work out, again, same philosophy. So yes, I know a lot of people like those, but I can be challenged on that. So if you have good recommendations that might make me change my mind, I'm all ears, but they're the ones that I tend to veer away from.
I agree with you.
I
So,
also don't like accidental like pregnancy stuff, just because I find that like I'm just pregnancy in books, and like when it comes at the end it makes me very happy, but any other time stresses me out like way too much. But I think that's also because I'm a person who was pregnant like not that long ago and is currently pregnant now, and I'm just like I don't want to read about any of that. Like that's not my fantasy. Currently my fantasy is people that have vasectomies or their tubes tied or just don't have any interest in children. Yeah, that's the fantasy.
um, as a reader, do you like to read the same genres that you write in, or do you enjoy reading completely different genres from what you write?
Yeah, completely different. That's why like Stumped is probably like a surprising book for me to mention as like my number one book that I'm excited for. But I tend to read a lot of contemporary romance when I'm in like a drafting process, because I don't tend to write contemporary. I would love to be able to write a contemporary romance. One, because I think it's super challenging. I don't know how authors do it. And two, I would love to read like sci-fi and fantasy romance again. Every time somebody recommends me a fantasy romance book, I'm like, would love to read that, but I will be like years before I can read that book. So yeah, I read totally different than what I write.
You have a book coming out at the end of this month. All superheroes need PR. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, All Superheroes Need PR is my first foray into traditional publishing. And I actually owe Dark City Omega a big thank you for that, because that book did pretty well. And my agent tried to shop it. Like I had already put it up for pre order, ended up getting in contact with an agent who was like, let me just try to sell this. I pushed the release back a couple months. An editor at Montlake fell in love with it. She's such a doll. She tried to pitch it to the like elderly white man who signs the checks, and she had to try to explain to him what nodding was, and he was like, absolutely not, get this off my desk. But she was still really like, Elizabeth Stevens, I'm gonna publish something by her come hell or high water. And so she was like, what else you got? I really should share online somewhere the pitch that I gave them for All Superheroes Need PR, because it's terrible. It's the first chapter that no longer exists. I rewrote the entire thing. So not a single paragraph was spared. And then the 2 paragraph summary I left them was like, superhero, contemporary romance. It's a workplace setting. She works in PR, maybe, and they fall in love. It was bare bones. It was like nothing to do with the actual story. But yes, it ended up coming together, and it's my closest attempt to contemporary so far, because I don't know how to operate in the real world. And I had also just been watching The Boys, and I found it so nihilistic and sad. And I was like, I need, I need a happy version of this, because this is so cool. And I realized that there's no superhero romances. That's just like not a genre. There are superheroes and there's romances, but there's no romance forward superhero stories. And then I found one by Mariana Zapata, which I loved, called Gracie and the Grump. Everyone should read it. She's a fantastic author. But she is like a very good contemporary romance author. And so it kind of lacked the Marvelness that I really love about superheroes. And so I wanted to kind of combine all of the things that I love in a real world setting, with lots of loud bangs and explosions, with enemies to lovers. And then we have like this kind of shy but tough, like PR director who's attempting to reform this. He's not even a villain, which is kind of how it's phrased in the blurb, but he's just like not interested. He's just completely uninterested in humanity. He doesn't want to have anything to do with any of us. But he meets Vanessa and has like a sprinkling of a fated mates kind of vibe. And he's like, this is a person that's going to be important to me. Let me terrify her to the point that she no longer has any interest in doing anything with me, and then spend the next like 8 chapters trying to rebuild that relationship. And then they end up, going on like a wild adventure together. And yeah. And because I was like very annoyed still about the Dark City Omega knotting thing, I was like, let me see if I can somehow throw a sneaky knot in there as well. So at some point in the book, the book entirely changes genres and becomes a monster romance with knotting. And I'm like, you already paid for it. So voila.
Love it.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah, pettiness is like a really good motivator.
it is. So with it being traditionally published, how has its publication and release process differed from all of your previous books?
Yeah, they're very different. And a lot of that is like, I tell anybody that wants to get into traditional publishing, like, you have to know exactly what you want out of it. And one of the things that I currently am struggling with is just time, because of my current child situation and toddlers requiring a lot of time. So I just can't do the drafting process is still my favorite process. Like, I know how to put a story together. The marketing stuff is stuff that I can kind of cobble together in my spare time, but the production side of things is like where I'm just like falling into a chasm of despair. I hate arguing with cover designers, which is apparently something I do very often. I hate having to find like the right editor for a book. I hate just like having to put everything together myself. It's so complicated. I mean, Ingram Sparks sent me a message the other day. A book that I've had with them for like 5 years has oversaturation in printing. I'm like, what does that even mean? I don't even know. Like, I don't want to have to deal with these kinds of small like things. And that's where trad has just like been just a lifesaver. So just taking all of that off my plate, sending me mock-up book covers, me just like quickly shooting an email back of what I like, what I don't like. Same with voice actors. Like the first time they sent me the voice actors, I was totally freaked out because they did not like them at all. They sent me back a second cast that was exactly perfect. Like they've just been such a seamless group to work with. And so that all has been extra marvelous. Where I get like super nervous is just around like the discourse around how much like trad pub supports like BIPOC authors in particular around releases. And so that's where I get like kind of nervous, and I won't know until, you know, the first week or the first month comes out, because I know what I'm doing, but it's hard to know what they're doing. And I also know that Montlake works differently than a lot of traditional publishers because they are an Amazon, a division of Amazon publishing. So they focus primarily on ebooks and audiobooks, and they really don't like, why would they want your book to be in bookstores? They want people buying the book off Amazon. So that's like obviously low priority. I know, like, you know, your USA Today bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list, like that's not a thing we're going for. And so it's hard for me knowing all of that to like be able to say how I think they're doing. I only have one other author friend who's ever gone through Montlake, and she's basically like, if your book sells, they'll like throw the full weight of the algorithm behind you and just like show it to everyone. But like if your book doesn't sell, then they just let you kind of slough off into the ether. And so I don't really know yet. I'm very nervous though. Will openly say that I am extraordinarily nervous. My agent also hasn't really helped in that regard, because she's like, your debut as a trad author is like really important. I'm like, great. Thanks. But it is definitely nerve-wracking.
So, are you going to, are there any events that readers can see you in either late 2025 or early 2026?
Yeah. Yes. So I've obviously had to scale way back in person stuff for this year, but I am going to try to make a local event in August. Yakima Book Company hosts a romance bookstore day every year that I went to last year, and it's just like so fun, well organized, and just like easy. And then my favorite con that I've been to, granted I haven't been to many, is Steamy Lit Con in Anaheim, and that's happening over Halloween this year. And I'm definitely making it to that. I love it. I love it so much. And then I have like one event booked for February already, which is Love LitCon. And I try to keep myself to like 3 or 4 in-person events a year, because otherwise it just gets so overwhelming. And then Imaginarium is the only other one that I've got booked for next year, but it's not even like announced yet.
Awesome. So, Elizabeth, we're going to move back into fun questions to wrap up the evening. But before we do that, we're going to touch back with Megan to see if we have any more questions in the chat panel. So, Megan?
You have a couple, yeah. If you're able to answer this, I don't know what the deal is and where you are in the process. Will all superheroes be a series? And if yes, which side character will be in book two?
Yes. And actually, book 2 is done and dusted and already up for pre order. So you can already check out All Superheroes Need Photo Ops. And that should be a big clue who gets to star in book 2. But Monica Neumann was a character that came out of left field for me. But when you meet her, she's in like the most intense, she's featured in like the most intense scene for me in the book, the most intense scene writing and the most intense scene reading, which is just like so bizarre because it's just like people watching TV. But I don't know how that scene it just like materialized in this like kind of epic way. But she's a war photographer and so much fun to write. Just like total third culture kid. She's like Korean and Black, but grew up in Berlin. And I think like a lot of that comes from my own childhood, because I'm like, my mom, we lived in West Africa, in Mali, in Bamako when I was a kid. And then I've basically spent like a third of my life, 2/3 of my life out of the US so far, and just moved back actually from Germany. My husband's German. So she was a lot of fun. And then the main male character is also a lot of fun because you'll meet him as like this knight in shining armor in book one, only to find out that he's maybe not as shiny as he seems. But the character is Tyrannus from book one.
Excellent. That sounds so exciting.
Yeah. He,
And then are all of your books available on audio? How do you decide when an audio version gets made?
I don't decide anymore because I am too poor to do audio. So I did the first three books in the Zaveri Mates myself in audio, and the returns were just like abysmal. I mean, Audible takes like all the percentages. They take, I mean, what, 60% more than that? Just for the distribution if you do exclusive. And then I think like I don't know, 70% or something if you're not exclusive, or I can't remember anyways. But going wide was a really good decision. And I was only able to do that because Dreamscape contacted me. And so Dreamscape bought the rest of the Zaveri Mates catalog, the Beasts of Gatamora catalog, and then I gave Podium the Population series just to see the difference. And so basically every new book I have come out is with one of those two, except for the Bone King and the Starling, only because that was a shorter book, more accessible to actually do myself. And so that one is available everywhere because I self published that. And I try to do simultaneous releases, of course, with audio because that has the best profit results, whatever. And also because like you want your book to be accessible to everybody on release day or as many people as possible on release day. And that was, yeah, like I said, the first time I ever tried to do a direct sale, which was way less like both more and less complicated than I thought it would be, but something I definitely would do again going forward.
Nice. And that's all we have, Donna.
Okay. Everyone, we're going to swing back over to Megan one last time at the end, so make sure you submit any of your last questions for Elizabeth now. But these last questions are what we're going to call rapid fire, and they are just what they sound like, quick round robin style. Whatever pops in your head, just say it, and then we move on to the next one. And with that, favorite liquid fuel while writing?
Coffee.
If you could only have one streaming service, which one would you choose?
Is Amazon Prime a streaming service? Because I just, yeah, I hate the other ones.
All right. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl. Well, I was, but we went over that.
Paper, e, or audio?
I am shamefully an ebook like on my phone reader.
Okay. Best escape, winter mountain getaway or warm island hideaway?
Definitely. I mean, come on. I'm a black girl. We don't do like cold, wet things. Definitely warm.
Beefy Viking Raider or sexy obsessive alien?
Vikings.
All right. Speed reader or poring over every line?
Speed reader. I barely read half the words on the page.
All right. And that is it. So, Megan, final check-in time. What do we have out there?
No, we're all good.
Okay. Well, I had a question that popped in my head that, like, I had thought of. You brought up mammoths at the end of the book. Where'd that come from?
I don't know. I was like, I realized that I had not written anything remotely historically relevant. And I think it was like a panic move where I was like, this needs to be more fantastical so people don't confuse this for like an actual historical romance. And so I was like, let's just give them a good mammoth. They existed in the same time, right?
Oh, actually, we did have one pop up. Could you tell us more about your writing diversity section on your website?
Oh yeah, sure. I sometimes have sensitivity read for different authors, and I think like one of the first viral posts I ever had on TikTok was like me talking about just like the do's and don'ts of trying to write Black people in genre fiction. And so a lot of folks found that really helpful. And so I just wanted to put like just a general, like, these are my quick thoughts on it on my website somewhere. And then also ways for folks to contact me if they do need sensitivity reading help. It's not a service I enjoy providing, so I don't advertise it very often, but it's something I will do if needed. I've run into like some, it's just it's a really weird job. And so any rate that a sensitivity reader ever advertises, I'm like, that's a fair rate, because sometimes I read books where I'm like, I don't know why you came to me. Like, there's barely any mention of like people of color in here, or it's done so well where I'm like, kudos, like I don't have anything to say. And then there's other ones where I'm like, I should have charged like $1 million for this, because I'm just like, this is deeply scarring, and like the authors don't respond in a way that's nice about feedback, or I'm just, yeah, so it's just a weird service. But I try to provide like the free generic advice that I can to everyone for free, because I love seeing more people in books of color, like, and I find it quite shocking sometimes when, I mean, I was reading like a football romance set in Tennessee, and there wasn't one person of color in the book. And it's just like not even realistic at that point. Like, okay, maybe you're in a small town in Arkansas, maybe you're not going to see another person of color, but come on, like some of this is just getting ridiculous.
Oh, thank you, TT. That's good. TT would like to know if you're planning any special editions for all supers.
Yeah, that was like, again, one of those moments where I was like a little bit disappointed with my publisher, just because like I'd gotten so many requests for like what indie bookstore is like running your pre-order campaign. And again, it's Montlake, so they are just like, they don't want to do that. Like, they don't want to basically create competition for themselves by providing like a special edition to an indie bookstore, or even selling one themselves is just like not profitable. So they're just not into it, which again, it's things that are helpful to know for me as like a first time trad author, and as an author, who, if all things go well, I would like to do another trad. I would like to have more books out trad, as well as continuing to do indie work. I definitely would never want to be all one or the other, because there are definitely problems with both sides. And just like even now, I'm waiting on, like, my first advance payment was paid out like the second I finished the first draft, and this one, is like 2 months late. So it's just, all of the stuff is like super variable, and I like having a diversified income stream, and hopefully I will work with a publisher someday soon that does like a fancy sign special pre-order edition.
Okay. We are small enough of a group that I am okay with, as long as everyone's respectful. If there are any last minute questions, if you want to take yourself off of mute, and ask your questions now. Okay.
Actually, I have a question. So, because this is a hard book to classify in some ways, like you were saying, like it's not really historical, not Viking, like, did you have trouble labeling it? Because people seem to want labels when for books nowadays, like whether it's like romantasy or historical romance, fantasy, paranormal. Did you find it difficult? Because when I describe it, I'm like, it's kind of seems to me like a Viking, but it's like, I'm like, it's like fantasy plus historical. Like it's like a combo to me because of the way it's set up.
Yeah, I think all of my books actually fall into this chasm of despair, where I had such a hard time with the Population series when that one first came out. It was my first book I ever wrote, but it's like alien vampires in a post-apocalyptic dystopian, real like urban fantasy setting. It just makes no sense. And same with Dark City Omega. That series is also it's Omegaverse fantasy, but every city is like so wildly different. Some of them have video games and some of them have no access to technology and some of them are like next one's like a Viking town but where everyone looks like they're from Asia and like just doesn't make any actual sense. And Monsters was Superheroes Need PR is also one like that too, where it's a contemporary romance. I've seen some early reviews from folks that don't know me, and they're like, "I thought this was a contemporary romance. Where did the monsters come from?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's just where we're gonna be." I don't know if I have the ability even to write like conventional genre romances. I think I did a good job with the Taken 2 series, and that really helped me because it was like clearly alien sci-fi romance. But otherwise, I always fall into the same trap. And so I've started to just kind of label them as everything. So I think like when I put in my keywords on Amazon for Bone King, it was like I put in Viking romance because that was clear. But then after that, I think I put in fantasy romance into a box, historical romance into a box, and I just let the machine mix it all up and just spit it out to whoever. Oh, and keep my fingers crossed because it's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, when I was trying to do the summary, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna call this like historical fantasy, may romance, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. I
But
saw
it's
the
all
first
good.
time I saw it labeled as historical romance, I was like, that's weird. Sure.
So, um, yeah. Well, everybody, I'm gonna say thank you again for joining us tonight. And thank you, Elizabeth. It's been a delight to spend the evening chatting with you and getting to spend the month of May discussing the Bone King and the Starling on Monday nights with the group. We
For
just
reading
really have
it.
had a blast.
Yeah, it's been super nice chatting to you guys too. And yeah, just and again, super floored by the reception that this book has gotten and super grateful for folks who want to chat to me about it.
So, before we close up for the evening, I've just got a few quick announcements. We're not going to be meeting next Monday, the 26th, due to the Memorial Day holiday here in the US. We will start back with Monday night read alongs on June 2nd. We're going to be beginning discussions for our June book, For the Girls, a Sapphic Contemporary Romance Collection by R.L. Merrill. Please mark your calendars now. Ro's going to be joining us to chat about the book on June 30th. Our reading schedule, links for the book, and the events that are going to be going up later this week, along with the recording of tonight's chat. So thank you all again, and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.